Welcome to Place and Experience. Indulge your senses with immersive game titles. Boost the excitement with our engaging promotional tools and generous network promotions. Be in control with XI Viewport Management Tool and experience seamless gameplay powered by X Platform. Enjoy Place and Experience as our partners do in over 20 regulated markets. And get ready to go big. Big play is...
Well, there you have it, and welcome back to yet another episode of your Next.io weekly news, where we bring you the biggest headlines of the week, whether you want them or not. I must apologise to any eagle-eyed viewers hoping to see Mr. Nico Jansen here today. Unfortunately, although we know he would love to be here with us, he has another engagement, which means that he can't be here this week. So there will be no 10 in 5, but we should shout out Nico and both of Nico's fans, because I'm sure the two of you will be really missing him. But we're lucky today. We have a special treat. I'm joined by our occasional alternative co-host, the one and only Zach Thomas-Aku, senior reporter at Next.io. Zach, first and foremost, welcome to the pod. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Connor. We're getting a little bit of sunshine here in southwest London, which is great. That's pretty rare at the moment. So, yeah, in a good mood.
Good. It's sunny, but it's freezing. But that makes me full of Christmas cheer. I'm ready for the festive season. I've been listening to Driving Home for Christmas for approximately a month now, which I'm slightly ashamed to admit. But I'm ready for it, Zach. I'm enjoying the bonhomie, the festive cheer of Christmas. It's all around us. And, of course, what more can you ask for than that? Now, it is actually quite fortuitous timing that you're with us today, Zach, because we are bringing you the latest from the island nation of Curaçao, where we've had some breaking stories developing all throughout the past week or two. A lot of that centered around the Curaçao licensee BC.Game, which is also the front of shirt sponsor for Leicester City FC. And they've been making headlines this week for, let's say, not the happiest reasons. They've been through a bit of a turmoil and through a bit of a tumultuous period recently, Zach. So we're going to dive straight into it. There's no 10 in 5 today, as Nico isn't with us. But as you know, you can always get the biggest headlines of the week by simply visiting Next.io and having a look at our latest stories. Now, we're going to start this one off with a story that came out last week. Zach, this was your first story of 3 about BC.Game and what's going on in Curaçao at the moment. So just to bring the audience up to speed, last Thursday, we reported that BC.Game had been declared bankrupt by a Curaçao court on the 12th of November, so a couple of weeks ago, amid some controversies around unpaid players and a contested ownership transition. Now, if you want to get this full story, we should be able to get you a QR code at the top, but otherwise go to Next.io and search for BC.Game. You'll find all the relevant information there. So, back on the 12th of November, the Joint Court of Justice of Aruba, Curaçao, St. Martin and the BES Islands declared Small House BV, which we understand to be the operator of BC.Game, the BC.Game brand. Yes, they declared the operator bankrupt earlier this month, according to court documents that we have seen. The ruling came after months of legal battles initiated by a group of international claimants represented by the Foundation for the Advocation of Victims of Online Gambling. For translation reasons, that's shortened to the SBGOK. So, the advocacy group says that it aims to bring litigation against Curaçao licensed operators that defraud players and was founded by prominent Dutch journalist Nardi Kram. Nardi Kram, a big player in the Curaçao news scene. So the court said, given the undisputed position of the SBGOK and other claimants that BC.Game does not maintain a local bank account and or reputable bank account in violation of the licensing conditions and the other position of Small House, it is sufficiently clear that it is in the state in which it has ceased to pay. That was a bit of a mouthful. But what they're saying is they don't have a Curaçao license, Curaçao bank account anymore. They don't have a reputable bank account. They're no longer paying out player winnings and that kind of thing. So the business was declared bankrupt in court. Just to take you back even further, all of this began after allegations that BC.Game players had made of misconduct and system issues leading to player losses. So SBGO came on with individual plaintiffs from Turkey, Indonesia, Costa Rica, and Austria, argued that Smallhouse BV, which we believe took over BC.Game's operations from Blockdance BV in April 2024, by the way, had failed to honour obligations to its players. So I believe last week, Zach, the operator, publicly released a statement addressing this matter. It said that it strongly denied the accusations and argued they lack substantial evidence and failed to demonstrate any violations. It added that internal investigations revealed inconsistencies in the cases, with many claims failing to hold up under legal and technical scrutiny. So BC.Game management said, "We strongly disagree with the court's recent rulings and will vigorously appeal the decision, as we believe it failed to adequately consider key facts. BC.Game is confident in our ability to demonstrate compliance and uphold our reputation as a legitimate operator in the industry." So it's a slightly contentious issue, let's say. There's a lot of contrasting opinions. The court did declare BC.Game's owner bankrupt, but the owner is disputing that. So there may be an appeals process and all the rest that comes along with some of these complicated court cases. But part of it was to do with the player claims, and the other part of this whole scenario is this question of ownership. Because in April 2024, as we mentioned earlier, Smallhouse acquired BC.Game from Blockdance. Now, following this question of bankruptcy and player claims and all the rest of it, Smallhouse contended that the acquisition was limited to BC.Game's assets, so its website, marketing operations, player databases, that kind of thing. But it excluded any liabilities tied to the previous owner, Blockdance. But the plaintiffs in the lawsuit provided evidence suggesting that Smallhouse maintained operational continuity post-acquisition, citing website registration inconsistencies and public representations of Smallhouse as BC.Game's operator. If you look at Blockdance's LinkedIn page at the moment, it still suggests that it is the owner of BC.Game. So it's a little bit murky, you could say. It's not exactly the most transparent ownership structure, and we haven't actually got the full doubt-free details on this. There's a little bit of doubt hanging over it still. Anyway, in the lawsuit, the court was presented with several claims, including substantial amounts which were allegedly withdrawn from the accounts of several players. And those amounts together totaled more than $2 million, so not an inconsequential amount of money. Smallhouse, in response, argued that the sums were either settled or arose from manipulations such as bonus exploitation and software loopholes. The court, however, found those defences to be unsubstantiated. If you remember earlier in this year, Zach, we already kind of had these questions arise about who BC.Game's owner was, because the Dutch regulator attempted to impose an €840,000 fine on the operator for illegally targeting the Netherlands. But in that case, Blockdance claimed it had only heard about the regulatory penalty in the media, but that it was reviewing a complaint from the KSA. So that was a big old long monologue, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot of moving parts here, Zach, and all that basically just to actually set the scene for the latest development in this story, which was revealed this week. So that's all the background, the bankruptcy, the player claims, the questions of ownership, And then all this, it seems, came to a head this week when the Curaçao Gaming Control Board announced that it intends to revoke the license of BC.Game. Now, Zach, of course, you're all over this story. You broke this story exclusively at Next.io just a couple of days ago. Why don't you give us some of the details of what you found out?
Well, yeah. Thank you very much, Connor. I mean, it really is an interesting story, and there are lots of aspects which kind of jump out to me as being a little bit suspect. Like the idea you could buy a company and everything, and all the brands and assets and everything, but then kind of say the liabilities, they're not ours, so we don't actually own anything from it, owe anyone anything from it, is a little bit suspect. But yeah, yeah. So the story that we broke this week was that the Curaçao Gaming Control Board intends to revoke the license of BC Games. I'm using that word very specifically, intends, because that was the word it used in the letter seen by us, in which they say they're going to do that. So BC Game basically has until Friday, which is tomorrow, to sort of write to BC Game, and also there's going to be a hearing where they're going, write to the regulator. There's also going to be a hearing on Friday where they will kind of lay out the case for staying a licensee or being revoked. And allegedly in the letter, this is due to questions about its finances and compliance with regulation. Now, anyone like me or you who his job it is to write about this stuff will know that it's not very common that we hear that the Curaçao regulator is revoking a license. Something you hear a lot from the MGA, which is another offshore jurisdiction, which has a lot of operators. But it's actually very rare to hear the Curaçao regulator do this, and I don't think it's a coincidence. This is coming amid like a torrent of bad press. I mean, this bankruptcy that you spoke about earlier, that's very unusually for an online operator. That was reported on the BBC and the Mirror. It made like national headlines in a really big way, because I think it's kind of painted its target on its back a little bit through this sponsorship deal with Leicester City. If you're suddenly like the front of shirt sponsor on the Premier League, for a Premier League team, then yeah, sure, you're going to get like a lot more exposure, and much more so than a crypto casino could usually get. But you also have a bit of a target, because then suddenly, if something happens with you, then that becomes news, and that can really like influence stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of that there. I mean, the other aspect of this is this is all happening as the Curaçao engages in a period of gambling reform. So historically, the gambling system in Curaçao was based on this rather dubious system where there were 4 master license holders who theoretically had to abide by KYC and AML and all the usual rules that licensees normally have to comply by. But below them, there was a whole level of what they called sub-licenses, in which these guys acted as middlemen and gave licenses out to other companies, which in practice had much less oversight. So this is in the process of being reformed now through the Curaçao Ministry of Finance and a guy called Javier Silvania. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Who's the minister at the moment. And the idea is, through this law called the LOK, that this will be abolished and there'll be no more sub-licenses, and as such, there will be proper oversight applied to everyone. Now, there's been some people who have criticised the way the law has the legislative process has brought to this point, as well as some other aspects which we'll get to in a second. But maybe going back to the football side of it. Despite all this going on, despite the bankruptcy, despite the now license revocation, Leicester City seems to still be going ahead with this with their sponsorship. Now, and I think it is kind of clear that BC Game are not bankrupt in like a normal sense, rather that they just didn't want to pay these player claims. So they're calling it an administrational procedure. And I think the club are thinking, well, they still can pay us, so we don't really mind. So here's what the comment they provided. We've been and continue to be in regular discussion with BC.Game regarding an active case in Curaçao. BC.Game have provided the club with the strongest assurances they are actively appealing in this case, and the process, which has been initiated in Curaçao, is administrative in nature and not arisen due to any concerns with their financial standing. BC.Game had further assured us that they have no issues with liquidity, and that they remain fully committed to meeting their ongoing contractual and financial obligations, including the club, and that this case will not impact BC.Game's continuing international obligations. So yeah, they're still going ahead with it. I wonder if that line will continue to hold as like more stuff comes out. But one thing that should be noted is that in principle, the casino that is advertised on the front of Leicester City players is not the same one as this Curaçao licensed crypto casino, because they have a white label license with TGP Europe, which means that they're theoretically its own thing. I mean, in practice, I think most people would say that what's been done here is to advertise the main wing of the organization, which is the international offshore crypto casino. But that's the theory. But yeah, I mean, this is that's kind of the story. There was another big swerve in this week. It seems it's all coming at once, which we'll get to in a second. But I mean, what do you make of it all, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Usually these companies, I'm not sure what the actual rule is on things like shirt sponsorship and club sponsorships, but we see it very frequently. A lot of these companies will have a white label agreement in the UK, which allows them to operate a UK licensed brand. But really, the Premier League isn't just targeted at UK viewers. You're targeting audiences worldwide via the Premier League. So without naming names, of course, there's a multitude of primarily grey market and offshore operators that do advertise in that way. So it's not something that's uncommon. It will become less common when the front of shirt sponsorship ban comes in 2026. But yeah, I think it's difficult for a club like Leicester, which is not exactly probably rolling in the money. It's not the world's most famous or most successful club. I believe they reported that this was their sort of biggest ever record sponsorship with BC.Game. So it's obviously a big earner for Leicester. They were quite sort of, let's say, a little bit lucky a couple of days ago, because when you broke this story about the potential license revocation, Leicester happened to be looking for a new manager. They'd sacked their manager and they were looking to appoint a new one. And there was a lot of media noise around who it might be. I believe Ruud van Nistelrooy is the eventual winner of that position. But yeah, I think it kind of came quite quickly. Like you say, it's been a succession of quite controversial headlines. Not the best look for a company. At the moment, it's a difficult situation, presumably for BC.Game, and they're trying to navigate this in the most painless way possible. As far as we can tell, of course, they're still operational. The brand's still live. And they have until tomorrow, which I'm sure they've been working diligently on, to appeal the decision. And we will bring you the latest just as soon as we get that update, Zach. I mean, for now, I'm not sure how much more there is to say about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine they will. I've read reporting that they're applying for a different license. I'm not sure we want to say which one on the stream, but they are. The reason companies have these licenses is not because they need to for have the stamp for approval. It's principally to access financing and bank accounts, and I imagine that would be the main risk of not being licensed for a pretty grey market operator like BC.Game. That it could kind of get in the way of that. So I'm sure they're making contingency arrangements, like I said.
Yeah. Well, that is not the only controversial story coming out of Curaçao this week. And we're going to go straight into another one in just a minute, Zach, because first, I believe we have a very short video message to play from one of our partners. Or not. I think we do. It's coming.
Tens of thousands of games, hundreds of studios, dozens of hub market partners, an industry-leading hub wallet, and just one. Tens of thousands of games, hundreds of studios, dozens of hub market partners, an industry-leading hub wallet, and just one API. Hub 88 is connecting businesses to a world of limitless content where the possibilities are endless. Hub 88.
Well, there you have it, and thank you to Hub88 for sponsoring this episode and keeping us coming back every single week here at Weekly News. And apologies for any slight technical difficulties we had there. Zach and I staring pie-eyed into the camera for 10 or 15 seconds, trying not to giggle.
Much like our meetings, Connor.
It's a lot like that, yes, that's right, yes. Just sort of stare into the silence and allow it to envelop us. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Anyway, it's the sound of silence. No, what we've got next, Zach, is another big controversial story out of Curaçao. It just has not stopped this week. There's a lot of controversy coming out, all kind of presumably stemming from the fact that it's going through this transitional period as a jurisdiction. You know, it's trying to really shake up the way it does things in terms of licensing and in terms of regulatory oversight and all the rest of it. So of course one would always expect some kind of teething problems to arise when this kind of change takes place, but we've had, let's say, some very serious accusations, in fact. So there was a report put out earlier this week, which basically sets out a series of criminal allegations against Javier Silvania, as you mentioned earlier, who's the finance minister of Curaçao, and Mario Galea, who'll be a familiar name to our viewers in Malta. He was the ex-chief of the Malta Gaming Authority, MGA. So the pair have been accused of several serious criminal allegations relating to Curaçao's new gambling licensing system. Now, where did these accusations come from? Well, a financial and forensic investigator and opposition politician, we should make that very clear, Dr. Luigi Fanete, apologies if I'm getting that name wrong, in terms of the way I pronounce it, but it's Faneyte, Fanete, something like that. So Luigi Fanete filed a 400-page report. Again, we managed to get hold of this at Next.io, and we've seen its contents. But it was filed with Curaçao's Attorney General's office and included accusations against several individuals involved with the overhaul of the gambling licensing system, which is going on there at the moment. So the complaint highlighted suspicions of, get ready, official misconduct, corruption, fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering related to the issuing of online gambling licenses in November 2023. So it's a bit of a historic case looking back to last year. But the scope of complaint and the seriousness of the allegations contained within the report led to one source suggesting that it may have had some kind of political motive ahead of elections in March 2025. Of course, I'm not commenting on whether that's the case, Zach, but that's what some sources have suggested. So Fanete, who published the report, is a member of the PAR party, a political party which governed Curaçao prior to Silvania's MFK assuming office following the 2021 elections. We did reach out to the Ministry of Finance for comment and for its reaction to the document, but we have yet to receive a response. As soon as we get one, if we do, we'll share that with you all. But we've had a kind of unofficial response, let's say, because Silvania has responded on Facebook and kind of alluded to the report. He argued that Fanete and his party represented the elite and that the National Ordinance for Games of Chance, as you mentioned earlier, the LOK, that's the new regulatory framework, he said that it reforms, that those reforms level the playing field compared to the previous system, which he argued had only enriched the 4 historic master license holders. So, Zach, again, you've been looking into this one in a lot more detail, and we know that it's kind of related to some of these initial license applications that were lodged with the regulator when the overhaul was introduced. So why don't you give us a bit more of the detail on this one?
Yeah, of course, absolutely can do, Connor. I mean, we've already had a few caveats, but before I go any further, I should once again reiterate, because it's been filed with someone who very much does have a political motive, and it's, you know, like they might not just be some neutral arbiter. You should take these allegations with a massive grain of salt. We're not saying they're guilty, and they haven't had a chance to defend themselves yet, which they no doubt will. There's been no sort of determination about you know, the whether it's true, but the fact that it is filed with the Attorney General's office and it's, you know, in many ways credible in other aspects, I think does mean that, you know, reporting on this is newsworthy. Significant, I think I would argue there's significant public interest throughout the Curaçao public, and also the gaming industry know that this is out there. There's no point just hiding it. We have to know what people are saying so we can plan accordingly. That's what I'd say. Now, digging into the actual specifics of what they're talking about. So they say that Galea was maintained a portal that issued provisional permits, and this all kind of centers around this. These provisional permits were issued in November 2023, as you said, and they were meant to kind of like bridge the gap, right, between the well, this is kind of what the ministry said, that between the old system where you had this kind of weird sublicense thing, which was kind of a little bit wacky, and there's the new system. Well, while the law is being finalized, we'll sort of do this kind of kludge. The issue is that Fayeti, as he argues in the report, says that there was no real legal basis for it. And they were kind of unilaterally doing this, and he also kind of questioned, who are these people? Like, these are a bunch of Malta gaming industry guys who've come to our island, and they're up to all sorts of kind of crazy stuff. So yeah, I mean, but like, that's one perspective. As Mario Galehi, sorry, I'm probably pronouncing that terribly wrong. Galea, he was, as a former chief regulator of the then Lotteries and Gaming Authority, now rebranded as the MGA. He has significant regulatory experience, and there's nothing necessarily untoward about the idea that he would come and consult on the regulations, right? And in fact, that's exactly the kind of thing. I'm sure now that David Rebuck's retired, he might want to do something like this, and there wouldn't be anything wrong with that if that was the case. You know, if you have regulatory experience, and it makes sense that you help people improve their regulations. But Fayeti says that it was the specifics of how this was done which was kind of untoward. So in the letter to the Attorney General, he says, all in all, this is a matter of tens of millions, and if it concludes, it can amount to hundreds of millions in lost government funds, plus claims for damages against the government as a result of affected players taking action against our government. Okay, so one of the kind of more juicy specific allegations is that, once again, I haven't verified this, we don't know if it's true, but Galea claims to have, the report says that Galea claimed to have hired staff amounting to 170 people to begin the work of issuing permits, and that these 170 people didn't actually exist. So at a technical briefing 3 months later, Slovenia allegedly said that no one so far had been hired, and that in fact they were just looking to bring in 85 people total, not 170. Additionally, that Galea and two other individuals were presented in a technical briefing in February 2024 as investors in the modernization of the gaming system, which were at the time was apparently, once again, I have no idea, received by skepticism by some of the people in the room. So plan of action was proposed, and then the report basically says, a lot of things never happened that they said they were going to happen. But then, in a way, it's a bit of a circle, this, because we began with BC.Game, and it goes back, and for some reason, fortuitously or not, it all sort of draws together. So Fayeti kind of says that BC.Game's bankruptcy was the decision to go public. He's got this quite juicy quote here. He said, when representatives of the GCB stated during an organised meeting that Glia used artificial intelligence to issue permits, I knew things were really bad. When crypto casino BC.Game was declared bankrupt on 12th November 2024, I decided enough is enough, and I started drawing out the declaration. This is he does have a legitimate point here. BC.Game were licensed under the new system. This new system, whose whole reason of being is to provide more oversight to licensees, right? But then you have just months later it declaring bankruptcy after defaulting on its liabilities. If you just put those facts together, there that does seem a little bit suspect. But once again, we don't know the real. We don't know for sure. Like I said, the report is 400 pages long. There's all sorts of stuff in there. We barely scratched the surface of it, really. But yeah, I guess we can leave that there.
Yeah, I think you're right, Zach. It's never going to be very clear cut. We've kind of heard accusations in the past that the way companies are structured and ownership structures and everything else is set up in Curaçao is kind of geared towards, concealing the identities of the people who own the companies. And there's a lot of anonymity there. Ultimately, I think this report is just the beginning of what's going to happen next. We don't know which way this is going to go. I think it probably asks a lot more questions than it answers. Like you said, and quite right to point out, there's no proof or nothing's been ruled on by a judge in this case or anything like that. We've got allegations. There's basically been no response yet from the Ministry of Finance or from Mario Galea. So the story remains totally up in the air, but I think it was important for us to come and set out just what the latest is. And as always, Zach will be following up on this one just as soon as we hear any more information. Of course, it's probably going to end up being a slightly long and drawn out process. Lots of moving parts here, lots of conflicting interests, let's say. There's the political element to all this. There's the players, there's the operators, the regulator. It's all a little bit messy, let's say. But the one place I can tell you that you can get the most up-to-date information is at next.io. And if you want to read the full story, just scan the QR code in the corner or visit our homepage and take a look. Like I say, there's not really much else we can say about this one, Zach, because it's so up in the air still. But as soon as we know more, we'll bring it straight to you. And I think that's about all we can say this week for our Curaçao update. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Connor.
There you go. Right, well, everybody, we'll be back here in the same place at the same time next week. So we'll see you then. And until then, you stay classy, San Diego.
See you next week.
Bye, Zach. See you then.
See you later.